Welcome everyone to Valcare's online training. We've done a couple of sessions, but they've been a little bit focused on key topics. So we've done some social workers support training sessions, and we did an funding application training session. And this is in a series of a healthy person. So the thought behind these series, we're doing a healthy mind, body, and spirit. We were looking at our training. Valcare does training traditionally once training specifically focused on an organization and on leadership and governance and things like that. And when we were thinking about training for starting training again for this year, because our training was suspended, and thinking about new ways of training, we thought, should we do governance? Should we do things that about leadership in a time of crisis? And even when I was thinking about doing leadership in the time of crisis, I got a little bit anxious because I'm a leader within Valcare. I'm one of the directors and the COO. And I thought, gee whiz, in this time of crisis, when I hear about leadership, I get stressed out and I don't know what to do sometimes. And there's a lot of people expecting me to make decisions that are wise and are going to help the organization. And I realized that if I'm struggling, there must be a lot of other people that are struggling when they hear things like more responsibility and you need to move forward, and you need to take the positive out of this crisis, and you need to make use of every opportunity, and you have to really work hard, and this is a wonderful time, and it's not. It really is. It's very stressful, and it's very there's a lot of things that we're all dealing with individually and corporately as organizations, as a community, as a country, as a human race. We're all dealing with a number of different things. And then we thought, well, maybe we should just focus on looking after your own personal health. And we thought that's to mind, body, and spirit. So we're doing a session on mind today. Next week, we'll be doing one on body. And the following week, we'll be doing one on spirit. We've got really, really very expert people who are going to be sharing with us their experiences and some of their expertise. And then we will reconsider looking at how to have a healthy organization in the next series. So let's start with how to be a healthy person before we go into how to lead your organization. So I just want to introduce Esté Meyer to you. This is her third year in a row that she has done training for Valcare. She's an organizational psychologist, has a vast amount of experience in dealing with organizations and also with people individually. So we've asked her to come on board to assist us with how to have a healthy mind. And I'm going to hand over to Esté, and she can take over the training. I just want to have a few ground rules. If you have any questions, put it onto the chat. You can direct the chat maybe specifically to me. My name is Brendan Smith. And if you have any questions or discussions, direct it to me, because I don't want to bug Esté with having to read through all the chats while we're going. But I do encourage everyone, if you have a question or discussion point or an experience that you want to share, put it on the chat, and then I'll raise it with Esté when we have a moment, and she breaks into a time of discussion. So Esté, over to you. It's lovely to have you. Thanks so much for your time. Yeah, carry on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brendan. Now that you are saying that you are involving experts, I get a little bit anxious myself because this is for me, this is really just a chat about, who we are as humans and how we are affected. And so thank you so much for having me. As you've said, this is my third training session for Valcare, and every time it just gets better. This one, however, is a little bit different though, right? I haven't had such a big Zoom audience before. So guys, just bear with us when we deal through the technical stuff together. If I start to sound like a chipmunk for some reason, it's because my audio can sometimes get distorted. Don't panic, I'm still fine. I'll just dial out and dial in again, all right? And if we experience any technical difficulties, we'll just, play it as it comes and dial out and dial in again. All right, is that good? Can I get a thumbs up? Awesome. So to those of you who don't know me that well, my name is Esté. I'm working for Crow DNA. It's a small HR consulting firm in the Winelands, and we help organizations to deal with all sorts of people issues and helping organizations to align their people to their strategy. And with that comes a whole range of services that we offer. I've got 2 kids. One is 5 years old. She will probably run in here at some stage in the session, and I've tried to prevent that. So, but if that happens, just know that it's not a stranger's kid or anything coming in. And then I've also got a 6-month-old baby that is really, really asking a lot of me at this stage. So the last 3 months have been extremely, extremely tiring and traumatizing, actually, to me as well. So it's always strange for me how when you struggle with something, it's almost like it's been put on your path, and now I'm asked to speak about healthy minds. And this is something that I've also been quite struggling a lot with over the last 3 months. So today, I'm not coming in as an expert. I'm coming in as someone who's also going through the same stuff as you guys, and also just learning through this together and figuring out, how our bodies are impacted in this very stressful time. So just before I start, there's a few things that I need to get out of the way, a few disclaimers, so that we don't have any lawsuits later on in the session. First of all, is you'll see that I will be focusing a lot on the biology of how our bodies function. And I am not a doctor, right? So that's the first disclaimer. I'm also not a scientist or a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon. I really wish I was, but I'm not. So it's literally just me trying to figure out the biology around our thinking and how our minds work. So if I'm not 100% spot on, and if I can't pronounce all the medical names in the right manner, just bear with me as well, all right? I literally had to ask Google how to pronounce amygdala, so because it's just so confusing, all these medical names. And the second thing is, as I've said, this is a different type of meeting that we've had. It's a different type of audience. Usually when we facilitate, you get the energy from people. You get an opportunity to engage, to ask questions. Where today it's a little bit different, all right? But if you do have questions, please, please, please raise your hand or ask Brendan. I want to make this as interactive as possible. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and you'll be able to see my screen. All right. If anyone can't see my screen, please let Brenda know, and then I'll just reshare it so that everyone is on the same page. All right. So the one thing that strikes me from the human race, actually, and specifically South Africans, is the way we see humor in almost everything that we do. Lockdown was in place for, I don't think, not even a full second, and already there were memes flying in and out, and it was quite funny to see some of them. The ones that I really related to quite strongly was the following. If 2020 was a drink, what would it be? And some people think, it would be something like a colonoscopy prep, right? I can strongly relate to that. And if you don't have dogs, you will probably not understand, but if you do, this one is also quite familiar. It's for your own good. You've got to stop touching your face, right? And then the best one, I think we all can relate to this one, you know, before a Zoom meeting, and if the Zoom meeting is with audio only, you literally have the opportunity just to get up and put on that microphone. But with video, it's a little bit of a different situation, right? Okay, let me just, can everyone still see my screen? Hey? So,
yes,
okay, fantastic. Okay, so if we think about our minds, what is our minds actually? What does it tell us? What does it say? And if we consider our minds, it is almost like a combination of our thoughts, our perceptions, our emotions, our motivations, memories that we've had, and also our imagination. Okay, so our mind is not located to one specific part. It is almost a combination of factors. And in order for us to know and understand what a healthy mind looks like, it is important for us to see, where does the mind sit and how does it work? So the mind is a combination of all of these factors. And the one organ almost housing all of these factors is the brain, all right? And for us to know how our minds work, it is very, very beneficial to understand what the brain is like and how the brain functions. Right. So you'll see that I will touch on a lot of aspects around the brain and how the brain works and how we deal with information and process information. Just know that once we understand that, it would be easier for us to understand how our minds are operating as well. Okay. So some fun facts around the brain. Right? The brain and the mind is definitely the most complicated part of our bodies. And this is also done on research. By the way, I will ask Brendan to share this with you so you don't have to take any notes right now. This presentation is yours. You can do with it whatever you want. And all the references are at the back. Okay, so you would be able to go to those specific websites. Then, in the first year of life, the brain grows 3 times its size, and it will probably continue to grow until you are about 18 years old, right? So try to remember that when you argue with a teenager or even a 5-year-old for that matter. They are still developing, right? Your brain is still developing even until a very late age in your life. The human brain contains more or less 100 billion neurons, right? And neurons are the things that help us to process information, to pass on information from one neuron to the next. So there's about 100 billion neurons in your brain, which is very, very interesting. I'm just going to put this little image here at the top. And then information travels between neurons in your brain for everything we see, think, or do, all right? It's very interesting. The fastest recorded, or according to scientists, according to research, they say the information can move between those neurons up to 250 miles per hour, which is 402 kilometers per hour. Now that's very, very quickly. The speed at which information travels in your brain completely depends on how familiar that information is. All right. So if you are engaging in a thought or a task that's quite familiar, the information travels very fast. It's almost like grabbing your keys before you go out. It's something that's part of you. It's something that you've done a lot of times. And it's almost like you don't even have to think about it. All right. This is important for when we get to some of the later topics, and I'll refer back to this. But just remember that the more familiar a topic is to you, the more familiar a thought is to you, the faster that information travels and the faster you process that thought in your brain. All right. You will definitely stop me when you have questions, right? Is it good? So
I'll stop. No questions so far.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. So please don't be scared if you see this. It's not a biology lesson. And obviously the brain doesn't only consist out of these 3 areas, right? But I want to use this image of the brain just to display exactly how information travels. So for those of you who've been in the previous training sessions, you would probably remember the SCARF model that we've discussed. I'm not going to go through the SCARF model again, but it relates to how our brain receives information, processes that information, and what it does with that information. All right. So for those of you who haven't been part of the session, just a very, very high level explanation quickly is that when way back in early man's time, we literally dealt with threats in a way that it was very physical. All right, so there was either a lion at your cage, or at your cave, sorry, not cage, at your cave. There was either a bear that you had to fight, and your brain at that stage had to enable you to either run very fast, which is the flight, or fight that bear, fight that threat. All right, that is where the fight or flight or freeze response comes from. Luckily for us, our environments have evolved, and things have gotten better, and we are no longer living in caves. We're living in houses, and we're driving with cars. So our environment have changed a little bit, but our brains are still functioning in exactly the same way. And that is why they call a part of our brain the primitive brain, because that part of our brain that receives that information has never really evolved past that threat or safety perspective. All right. So what it says is, when we experience or when we perceive any level of threat, whether it's someone at work that we don't get along with, whether it's being in a confrontation with a spouse, we are responding to a threat in our brains, and our bodies are preparing us to either fight or flight. The physical and the biological processes that happens in our bodies are allowing us to either fight the situation or run like hell. All right. So for us, the brain, the primary function of the brain is to survive. Okay. So we are wired for certainty. We are wired to know that we can survive a situation. And the road that a message travels in your brain, I will explain just now. But as soon as you get a sense that your survival is threatened, your brain responds with that fight or flight or freeze response. All right. So when we get any type of message, right, it usually travels through our spinal cords. And the first stop that it makes is the amygdala. Okay. The amygdala, you would probably also recognize, they call it the lizard brain, because our amygdala is very, very, very close to the brain of a lizard, right? Or they call it the primitive brain. This is a very small part of your brain, but it's got a very powerful effect on how you react. And this is why they say this type of brain has never evolved past it. All right. We are, just hold on a second, Lani. Yeah, come nowhere. So we are constantly almost battling to fight this primitive brain and the emotional responses that it allows us. All right. It helps us with emotional processing. It helps us to interpret experience, all right? And the very important word here is the perception. So one thing that's quite interesting is our brain can't distinguish whether we perceive something or whether the situation is real. The brain just takes up the senses and it works on perception, all right? It interprets those experiences based on the perception that it has. And when it perceives danger, it sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. All right, the hypothalamus is here, right? That little small part in the brain there. And that perception can also be based on memories that's similar to previous experiences that we've had. So let's, for example, take a very extreme situation. Let's say you were at a stage in a place where your life was threatened, all right? Somebody perhaps came into your house, right? In that stage, your brain reacted in a fight or flight experience, and in that experience, it took out all of this, or it actually got into almost like a tunnel vision. And it's really focused on your survival in that stage. In order to help you survive that experience, your senses were completely heightened. So what you saw, what you heard, what you felt, and what you've experienced were almost emphasized because the brain made that happen so that you can avoid similar situations in the future. All right. It almost helped you to put that experience in your memory, to engrave it there so that you can avoid it in future. So now when you get to another situation and you experience the same type of sensations, you experience the same type of senses, you experience the same type of smell, for example. Let's say you smell something that takes you back to a previous experience. Your brain sees that as a warning sign. So it says, well, you've had a similar experience with the smell before, and you now need to get out of this situation. I hope that makes sense. So when it experiences this danger signal, right, it sends a message to the hypothalamus, right? Your hypothalamus is almost like a control center for your body. It communicates with the body through the nervous system, okay? And it physically prepares your body to fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, so it sends blood to your extremities. It sends oxygen to your heart so that it can pump faster. It sends out adrenaline in that specific moment, right? So adrenaline is that hormone that enables you to jump a little bit higher, run a little bit faster. And if this threat continues, it sends out cortisol, all right, which is a stress hormone. When you get into this threat mode, it's almost like I said, tunnel vision. Your brain blocks out any information that's not relevant to your survival, right? Now, this fight or flight or freeze stage is good when you're in that moment because it helps you to survive. It is, however, not as ideal in the long term, all right, because you can't really engage naturally in that stage. You can't really show compassion in that stage. You can't really do the normal things that you do every day if you are constantly in a fight or flight or freeze mode, okay? It's not a good stage to be in the long run, okay? Then what also happens, and this is, it either happens like a split second after the information goes to the hypothalamus or literally at the same time, right? It's very, very close to each other. What also happens is your brain sends a signal to the cerebral cortex. This is where your frontal lobes is, all right? So it's this part here. And the frontal lobes are the logical part of your brain. This is where the clear thinking happens, all right? You can think, you can reason. This is where your decision-making takes place. This is where you can plan. So it's a very different process than what's happening here, right? This is fight or flight or freeze. This is panic. This is really not a good place to be in. Where this is a better place. It allows you to think clearly through situations. It allows you to determine a logical response. So in effect, your brain is almost, when you experience distress signals, it's almost like your brain is at war between the cerebral cortex or the frontal lobes and the hypothalamus. All right. So in the face of danger and uncertainty, the amygdala automatically activates that fight or flight. We know that already. And the frontal lobes, on the other hand, are processing the information. So there's this tug of war between these two areas of your brain. The frontal lobes or the cortex determines, is this threat real? Okay. This is where the reality part comes in. The amygdala and the hypothalamus just had this perception of a threat. Your frontal lobes are necessary to come and say, guys, you need to calm down, right? Like Taylor Swift. My daughter loves Taylor Swift for some reason, and she sings that you need to calm down song the whole time. So it really rings true. You know, the frontal lobes are almost like the parent in the situations. Like, please chill, calm down. The threat is not real. Okay. If the threat is mild or moderate, the amygdala almost gets disabled, all right? And the rational response take over and the frontal lobes win the argument. However, if the threat is strong, if you really perceive this as a threat, you can find yourself in an amygdala hijack. All right. This is when the party really stays at the house of the amygdala. And the amygdala and the hypothalamus, these two areas, they have an awesome time with a very irrational response. Okay, so then we are in that tunnel mode. We can't think clearly. We are constantly functioning under adrenaline or cortisol. We don't react rationally to the situation, and it's definitely not a good space to be in. So according to the scientist, if this is your brain, and the party is staying here at the amygdala and the hypothalamus, right? It's almost like you need to now reactivate your frontal lobes in order to stop this amygdala hijack. And the way to do that is to engage in thinking, engage in your frontal cortex, force yourself to think consciously about things, okay? What they say is how you can do that is to engage the frontal cortex. And then I really appreciate this step. Acknowledge you feel threatened. Guys, this, like Brendan had said, and I can resonate to that so much. Throughout this time, I've read a few things of what people out there think you should be doing. You should be learning another language in this time. You should start a side business. You should exercise. You should, I don't know, find yourself, your inner peace, all sorts of things. But we are in a state of emergency, literally, in the country, and your body is currently in a state of emergency as well. All right. And the way to almost reactivate your frontal cortex is to acknowledge you feel threatened. That is the first step, right? In any situation, in any problem that you face, acknowledgement is the hardest. So acknowledge that we feel threatened, right? Continue to engage your thinking processes by assessing the situation that you are in, right? We are at home. I don't know how many of you are parents and have to work from home still. It is tough. It is not an easy thing to do. Cleaning, cooking, kids, working, worrying about touching your face the whole time, getting sick. There's lots of things playing in at our minds at this stage. So if we continue to engage our frontal lobes, if we continue to think about the situation, assessing the situation, we can realize that, right, this is what's happening. I know that I am in a distress mode. I can feel it in my body. I can see it, how it plays out. Become aware of your emotions and your body, right? Don't know how many of you have experienced panic attacks before or know someone who has experienced panic attacks. One thing that they tend to do, in the psychologists, what they do in those situations, they use a grounding technique, okay? The grounding technique is literally this, what I'm busy explaining here now. It is about engaging your senses, engaging your thoughts about what you are experiencing. So when people are experiencing anxiety attacks, they call it the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 approach. Okay, so they ask that person who is experiencing that attack to name 5 things that they can see. Right, so immediately you're taking that control away from the amygdala, taking the control back into the frontal lobes and asking them to process their environment from a logical perspective. So name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, right? 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So by that, you enable your senses, right, to actually respond appropriately to your environment, and you're putting the control back in your logical brain. Okay.
Just can you just repeat that again?
Okay. I will put this in the presentation as well and share it with you, but let me just put that again. It's 5 things you can see, right? 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. This works extremely well with kids as well. When they are in that massive tantrum phase, or they're not feeling very well, or they are being unsettled, it really helps to sit with them and identify these things. One other tip that they also told us as psychologists is to have, if you know that you are prone to get anxiety attacks, have a mint or a breath mint or a piece of gum or something with you. Because the moment you put it in your mouth, your senses start to reactivate. You can physically taste that mint in your mouth, and you put the control back in your frontal lobes, where you are thinking about what you are experiencing. Does this make sense? Right. Well, you guys will ask me when you have got any questions. I can't see the faces right now. I've taken out the little cameras because just so that you can see my screen. But you guys, you will tell me when there's any questions. Hi, Brendan, there's no questions.
No questions yet.
Awesome.
But I invite everyone, if you do have a question or comment or want to share something, please do.
So this is a lot to take in, right? This is a lot of information. So let's just step away from the biology for a second, okay? I want you to think about how many threats, how many uncertainties, and how many senses of danger have you experienced over the last 3 months with lockdown. And I think each and every one of us can say there has been at least 5 or 10 times where I've experienced a lot of panic, all right? I've had meetings with clients and then my kids screaming in the background, and I've literally had a day where the client, the CEO of the company, told me, please take 5 minutes to go sort out your kids. I can't tell you what that did to me. I was extremely embarrassed, but it is also part of what is happening. And I had to deal with that, by processing that information and just by reminding myself, we are in this time, right? This is now how it is, and people will understand what you're going through. But my point here is we've had tremendous stress over the last. We are stressing about health. We're stressing about our jobs. We're stressing about security and illness, loved ones who are vulnerable to COVID. And it's important for you guys and for myself to know what is the effect that all of the stress will have on us. If we think about that panic state versus stress state, right? We need to distinguish between that as well. Are we in a panic, or is it a bit of a longer term, which is turning into a stress? The adrenaline hormone runs out quite quickly, right? It doesn't last very long, right? Unless your body is secreting hormone or that hormone all of the time, unless it's secreting adrenaline the whole time continuously, then it becomes a problem. There's actually a disease that I'm not sure what they call it, but it's literally where your body has been functioning on adrenaline, and the adrenaline is up. There's no longer it's no longer able to produce that adrenaline because that gland is almost worked out. All right, so that is happening. That is a real thing that we need to face with. If that panic situation, that amygdala going completely out of control, if that continues, it switches over to stress. And there's a whole range of health stuff that follows from that. I mean, I don't need to tell you what stress does to your heart, your skin, your hair, everything, right? It's really becoming part of our bodies, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to recognize that, all right? So, as I've said, in this time, I've read a few articles about how trauma can actually be re-triggered. So I've dealt with a client not long ago. She was in a very abusive relationship, but it was like, I don't know, 15 or 20 years back. It was a long, long, long time ago. When COVID arrived and lockdown kicked in, I think it was about in the second or third week of lockdown, she started getting panic attacks, right? Her brain associated the circumstances in COVID to the circumstances she was facing back when she was in that abusive relationship 20 years ago, right? The isolation she's experiencing now took her back right there in the isolation she was in when she was in that relationship. The stress about things took her right back there to that relationship. And the panic attacks that she got now was actually a response to the abuse that she suffered 20 years ago. So know that in this time, trauma can actually be re-triggered. And we might feel very confused about what's happening. Just know that it is your body's way to respond to all of these signals that we are currently facing. All right, so my point here is that we need to take a minute, pat ourselves on the back, be kind to ourselves, because we are actually going through a lot right now. Okay. If we look at how our minds interact with our bodies, I think this is where the magic actually comes in. You know, what happens in that mind doesn't only stay there. Our whole body is affected, and later on our whole spirit would be affected as well, right? So our minds and our bodies are very powerful allies. And how we think can obviously affect how our bodies feel, right? So if we have concerning thoughts, it is bound to spill over in our bodies. And then how our bodies feel can then influence the way we think, right? So if we are constantly battling with headaches or tummy aches, that in fact would then have a very big effect on our mental health and how we experience every day. Okay, so it's important for us to know the link between what's happening in our minds and how it manifests in our bodies. There are two ways. So on the one side, if you worry about finances, the future, your health, etc., you have tense muscles, right? You can have stomach pain, you can have headaches because of that stress, because of those hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline that continuously, you know, is secreted in your body. But the flip side is also true. If we can foster positive thoughts about some of the things that is currently happening, our brain produces endorphins, which are natural painkillers and which can strengthen the immune system. Okay, so remember, this is not a guilt-ridden session. We are having a guilt-free session. So it's not about you need to think positively and you need to meditate 5 hours a day and you now need to go for a 20K run every morning. It's not about this. It's about understanding what's going on and then trying to foster your thoughts, trying to activate that frontal cortex to highlight and to identify some of the positive things that we can take out of this. All right. There's different philosophies about what's happening. Some people say everything happens for a reason. Personally, I believe that not everything happens for a reason necessarily, but I believe that there's always something good that can come out of any situation. Doesn't matter how dark it is, all right? So another way in which our brains and bodies communicate, and this is amazing, guys, this is awesome. My daughter, Lana, would say, your mind will be blown. She really enjoys saying that. So another way in which your mind and your body communicates is through neurons. And did you know that you have over 500 million neurons in your gut? It goes all the way from the esophagus right down into your intestines. There's almost 500 million neurons. It's more than the neurons in your spinal cord. It's called the enteric nervous system, the ENS. If you want to go read up on that, it is extremely interesting, all right? Those neurons help you to digest your food. And it's literally almost as if the brain said, look, dude, I am not someone who can deal with digestive stuff. I am going to multitask or to delegate that, not multitask, to delegate that function to the gut, right? I can't deal with that as well. So there's neurons in your gut that regulates how you digest your food, but it also picks up on stress signals, okay? The cool thing is there are also neurons in your heart as well. There's about 40,000 neurons in your heart, and it does the same function. It regulates how your heart beats, and when there's a distress signal, it continuously communicates with the brain, and it helps your heart to beat either faster or slower, becoming more anxious or become more relaxed. All right, so it is amazing how your body can then respond to the stress signals almost on its own. These neurons function independently from the brain, but it frequently communicates with your brain the whole time, all right? And it regulates your functions. So you've probably heard about, people saying, I've got a gut feel. That's exactly what it is. If you are being stressed, your body is literally telling you, your body picks up on that stress in your gut. You've got probably a little bit of an upset tummy or a bit of a butterfly effect going on, and it tells your brain that there's some trouble, there's some stress. Okay. And the same with your heart. So when you are calm, your heart is likely to beat in a more steady rhythm. Your gut is at ease, and it's allowing you to digest your food properly. But when you are stressed or when you are tensed, you tend to get butterflies and upset tummy, and your heart rate picks up. So that connection for me was really amazing to know that. If we ask ourselves now, what does a healthy mind look like, right? We have to consider wellness from various aspects. We can't just say, well, you know what, my body is in top shape, so I've got a healthy mind. Your mind is, like we said, a combination of a few things, all right? So a healthy mind, right, is a mind that then essentially allows you to achieve a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So in essence, the well-being factor is the way in which we measure health, right? And the health of our mind specifically. Now, well-being can be physical, it can be social, it can be mental. It's not how many hours you are meditating. It's not how many books you can read. It is not whether you can move objects around without touching them. It's not how well you can remember things, right? Well-being is literally about how happy you are from a physical perspective, a mental perspective, and a social perspective. The question, the million-dollar question now is, in COVID-19, facing the situation that we are in at this stage, what are the typical circumstances and the characteristics that we are facing now? And can we expect our minds to be as healthy and as happy as it was, in normal circumstances? So just from the audience side, and maybe, Brendan, you can, I think I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. And then if you guys can just, via the comment section, tell me some of the characteristics of the past 3 months that you've been dealing with. What are the typical challenges? You can use the chat function.
No chats yet. While we wait for a few people to catch up and their typing, I will share.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges that we have had is that there's been I think all of us work within the NGO sector.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of expectation on us in this time to help others.
Yeah.
So we're not just carrying our own personal burdens, we're carrying the burdens of our community as well.
Absolutely.
That puts a lot of pressure on us.
Lots of responsibility as well, right?
Yeah. So that you're not just stressing about yourself, you're stressing about all the people that you generally help. Absolutely. There are a few other chats. I'm going to read them. One says feeding the helpless. Feeling helpless. Feeling helpless. They're streaming in now.
Okay.
Different people have different rhythms, different expectations.
That's true.
Being able to interact with our clients the way we are used to doing. Mm-hmm. Being isolated from the interactions we're used to. So cabin fever.
Isolation is a massive thing, right?
And then somebody says too many housemates in lockdown.
In each other's space. It's a real thing. It is definitely a real thing.
Wedding cancelled and not seeing family and friends. So life interrupted.
Yeah, and disappointments, right?
Stress, anxiety, inadequacy within my working life and being a mom to balance home life, work life, and helping the public.
Yeah.
Somebody says, I think everyone needs love. Then paradigm shifts to cope with what we face daily.
Absolutely.
Sustainability.
It's exhausting to really try and cope with everything, right?
Too many balls in the air to juggle. The heartbreak of the community and not being able to help everyone. To say no to people in need is really tough.
Sure. That's so true. That is so true.
Feeling detached from the outside world. And then having to rethink our business functions and services to our beneficiaries.
Jeez, right. So guys, this is very stressful times, right? Isolation, feeling helpless, and dealing with the uncertainty, I think, is probably the common thread that I'm seeing here, right? Not being able to do the things that we love. There's another few comments that came in here. So change is a massive thing. And remember, our brains is not a friend of change, okay? We do need it. We need to stay engaged. We need to grow. But the brain wants certainty. The brain wants to survive. The brain wants to steer clear of all things that can threaten the survival of a human being. So if I'm just quickly going to go back to sharing my screen. All right. If we think about what we have been dealing with, let me just quickly go out. I think it has stopped sharing. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'll be with you in 2 seconds. I hope that you can see my screen.
We're back.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, so a healthy mind during C19, everything that you've discussed now is what we are facing. We're facing change on a massive, massive scale. And the thing is, it's not only change, it is continuous change. So it's not only to say, okay, it was from a normal kind of situation to a lockdown situation. Even the lockdown situation keeps on changing. Then the schools will be opening, then it won't be opening. Then we can go back to work, then someone tests positive, then we're back at home. So it's this continuous change. And I told my husband the other day, it's almost like you get used to this level of chaos, and then another thing hits you from the side, and you have to adapt to a whole new level of chaos, right? So it's a constant wheel that goes around, changing the whole time. Isolation, illness, right? And if it's not necessarily COVID, it can be other illnesses that we are struggling with. We've dealt with many individuals struggling with mental health illness, and this time is especially tough for those individuals. Stress, I don't have to even explain that. Financial stress, work stress. Will we have a job? Will I get my full salary? When will the schools open? Lots of matriculants writing exams, not knowing whether they're going to finish the year or not. Multitasking, and we'll get to the multitasking situation just now. Multitasking at home, right? Multitasking is not good for our brains. It is exhausting. Wearing masks, excessive hand washing, the physical effects of wearing a mask, inhaling your own CO2 is not always a good thing, right? Especially on a longer term. And then that excessive hand washing, right? Almost killing the healthy germs as well as the virus germs. So is someone joining us? Guys, can you just quickly mute your speaker? Is it possible? All right. Trauma, reliving the trauma and uncertainty about the future. Now, please hear me very well here. I'm not saying that we shouldn't adhere to the lockdown regulations. Please, please, please adhere to them. Stay at home, wash your hands, wear your mask. It is the best way to flatten the curve. But what I am saying is two things. First of all, be conscious of the effect that this situation has on us. And then secondly, give yourself a break. Be kind to your mind, be kind towards yourself, and have some compassion towards yourself, right? Given the biology and everything that we've discussed up to now, we can really expect us and our bodies and our minds to go through a tough time. All right. Any questions before we move on? Nothing. Great.
No.
If there are any questions, please shout. So let's move away a little bit, or maybe to a different wagon. It's the same train, but just a different wagon. What happens with our minds and productivity, okay? Especially in this time, it is very, very difficult to be productive. The typical challenges that we deal with clients is working from home and how to be productive, you know, while you are trying to manage your kids and try to clean your house and cook your food. And I don't know why kids are just hungry continuously in this time being at home. It's like they just had a grape and now they are hungry again. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's a biological thing that we can research for the next session. But it is crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on, and to be productive in this time is very difficult. The good news is that our brains have adapted to some extent to coping with some level of pressure, some level of challenge, and some level of stretching, all right? And when you perceive that through a productivity lens, right, the right amount of pressure, the right amount of stress can actually put your brain in a place where it functions quite well, okay? So if we look at the graph here, performance from low to high and challenge or stretch from low to high. If you are sitting at work specifically now and you are bored, the challenge, you're not challenged. Your mind is not being engaged. You are not doing the stuff that you enjoy. Your performance is likely to be lower as well, all right? As the challenge and stretch goes on and gets more, your mind actually starts to function in a place where you can be the best version of yourself, right? If you are in the right place, your skill set is aligned to what you want to do, your preferences are aligned to what you need to do, and the work is providing you with the right level of challenge, and it's interesting and it's engaging, your performance can then be optimal. However, if this challenge and this stretch continues, it starts to decline again and you get to burnout, all right? And I think some of us are probably here. It was probably, you know, an interesting transition going into working from home, and, you know, you can set up your home office and have your snacks with you and, you know, sit with your blanket. And it's a different environment, your mind is engaged. But as the time continues and the stress continues, we can reach a place of burnout. Just something that's quite interesting, burnout and boredom has almost exactly the same symptoms. So you can feel stressed, you can feel exhausted, you can feel unfulfilled and extremely sick from being bored as well. And so if you are at a place where you are not happy with what you do and you are stressed and you don't seem to function optimally, ask yourself, is it burnout or is it boredom? Okay, it's quite interesting because those two present exactly the same symptoms. And then, as we've spoken about multitasking, right? We think that we are very clever and we are so cool and so awesome when we get to multitask, but it's actually not a very good thing for our minds, okay? Research showed that when we complete tiny little tasks, like sending an email or posting something on social media or responding to a text, your brain secretes dopamine, right? That is a reward hormone. So our brains are completely addicted to dopamine. That is why TV games are so addictive, because it just continuously give you that sense of gratification, right? And when we are switching between these little things, you know, sending an email, making a sandwich, doing that, we almost get the sense that we are accomplishing a lot. We've done a lot today. But then at the end of the day, when we have to, I don't know, reflect on the day, in my case, I need to capture my hours on Sage. I was like, what in the world did I do today? I mean, it feels that I was very busy. It feels like I accomplished a lot, but when I actually have to capture my hours, I see that I really did not accomplish absolutely anything today. So that instant gratification is a very dangerous perception. It's a very dangerous thing for our minds. It's basically the recipe that social media uses, right? The research shown that even your fingers and your thumb scrolling up provides you with that dopamine. It is stimulating dopamine with it's a movement that your brain enjoys, that thumb scrolling up. Okay, posting a tweet or posting something on Instagram or Facebook and getting those likes and getting the reactions, that is dopamine in your brain, and your brain loves that. And that is why it can be so addictive, right? The sense that we are accomplishing a lot creates a bit of a dangerous feedback loop for us, because it's not the truth, right? What actually happens when we multitask, we are just switching from one task to another in a very rapid way. And each time we switch, it burns oxygenated glucose. The fuel, that is the fuel that our brains need to keep on functioning. And when we switch between those tasks, we actually burn the same amount of glucose that we would have just focusing on one task, all right? So that can easily make us feel exhausted very early on in the day, right? It makes it more difficult to organize our thoughts. We can struggle to filter irrelevant information. It reduces efficiency. It makes us feel tired, and it creates stress and anxiety. I've read something interesting, and they say a lot of the programs today, the series, etc., are actually created to have low impact, all right? So that we can still sit with our phones and do our things on our phones while watching the TV. It's not as engaging content because they almost incorporate the fact that we will be busy with other stuff as well. And if we are busy, we won't follow the plot or the storyline. So the content of the series and the stories and the TV stuff that we find today is actually a little bit less quality, because they are incorporating the fact that we are actually quite busy with other stuff as well. So it really makes you think, right? If we want to improve our productivity, just some tips, to work from home. In the morning, sort your tasks according to what is urgent versus what is important. Don't know how many of you have read Stephen Covey's, I think it's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a very, very popular book. But he talks about urgent versus important, and he's got that matrix to say, well, if something is important and it's urgent, it's good to focus on that. But we usually spend our time on things that are urgent but not important. The phone calls that come in, the emails that we have to respond to, and it's almost like we go to those tasks, we quickly respond to that email or take that phone call, because it makes us feel that we are accomplishing things, and we can make that tick, right? We can do a tick next to it. If we really want to make a difference in how we function, we need to figure out, is this urgent and important, or is it urgent or only important? All right. They say that we need to do our more important task first in the morning, just to get that over with and done with. We are more engaged in the morning. I do believe that it can differ. All right. Some people are functioning better in the day. Me, myself, I'm functioning better at night. That's the time where I get to focus. So I tend to leave my important tasks for that time of the day where I can really focus, and when it's quiet and when I know that I will have the time and uninterrupted time to work. So find the time of the day that you are at your best, all right? Cut the tasks that won't help you reach a goal. And the next one is very similar. If you can ask yourself 2 questions. Can this be done only by me, right? And is it important? If the 2 answer is no, or if you've got 2 no answers out of that, cut that task, right? Delegate it to someone else or leave it for later. Write tomorrow's to-do list tonight. I tend to stick to that also. That helps me a lot to just, when you get up in the morning, you already have your priorities. And then it is not when you open up your inbox, you do get the distractions, but you already have your priorities in mind. Where if you don't do it, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed with everything that came out or that came in during the night. What I also say is do creative work first, but again, find your time of the day where you are the most alert and the most awake to do that. Eating in front of our computers, not sure how many people do that. I'm very guilty of eating in front of my laptop. Guys, not only is it for me a little bit gross when all the crumbs and stuff falls on the laptop, I really am grossed out by that. I still do it, but I'm still grossed out by that. And the second thing is, remember what we said about the neurons in our guts, the enteric system, the enteric nervous system. Our tummies can't digest our food if we are focusing on other stuff and really stressing about work and typing to an email and taking a bite. It's not good for our digestion, and it's definitely not good for our mental health. So when you take a break to eat, try to move it away from the computer so that you can focus, your senses can engage with your food, and your tummy can relax while it's digesting that food. According to research, it is the optimal point of functioning is 52 minutes, right? People cannot be engaged for longer than 52 minutes, or most people cannot be engaged for longer than 52 minutes. 52 minutes is like the pinnacle of engagement. And then after that, your attention starts to wander and your energy starts to drop. So what they say is stick to 15 minutes of work and then take 17 minutes off. The point here is give yourself enough breaks, right? Sometimes we are in flow, sometimes we really are engaged, and then we know that we can't break the cycle, and we need to be in the cycle, and we need to make use of this time. But when you are struggling to concentrate, know that a break will probably help you more than it would distract you. The one thing that we've done at work that helped so much in this time is to keep our Zoom meetings, the less important Zoom meetings. Obviously, there are more important Zoom meetings where you need longer, but to keep most of our meetings to 30 minutes. It just made the world of difference, because usually we tend to schedule an hour for a meeting, and then we tend to small talk and just rehash certain things and not getting to a decision. If we know that we have 30 minutes for a meeting, I can't tell you what a big difference that made to us. Even with clients, to say, well, we've got 30 minutes, we have to make a decision on this right now before we can move on. And it's almost like everyone is just in a different mode. Then if we have been talking for an hour, it is exhausting. It's also not good to sit in front of your computer the whole day, and working from home tend to do that to us, right? Because it limits our blood flow, it limits our concentration span. So try to stick to the 30-minute meetings, because that really makes a difference, and it allows you with some time to get up and have a leg stretch or whatever. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm conscious about our time. I know that we've got about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to run through the next few areas quite quickly, and then I want to get to the last slide, which is quite important for me, all right? So factors limiting our minds to function optimally, I think we've covered most of them. But the research shows that factors indicating wellness or factors influencing wellness are the following 7 factors. Your body have a massive effect on how well you feel. The work that you do has a massive effect. Your spirit, and not able to do what you are passionate about, that can definitely affect your wellness. Your finances or a lack thereof, community, emotions, and your environment, right? If there's lots of stress, lots of people, remember we've heard now lots of roommates in this time, people being in each other's spaces. Think about how many of these factors you are currently faced with, and then take just a bit of a stock take in terms of your mental health. And just know, be aware of what's going on and how that can affect you from a mental health perspective. One technique that they also taught us is, it's a very big word, it's neuroplasticity. And it helps us to adapt our minds to different situations. In effect, it is about rewiring our brains and how we think about things, right? So remember, this is not a guilt session to say you need to be more positive and you need to do this. This is a very practical tool to think differently. And I want to remind you of that fact that we discussed right in the beginning, so that information travels very fast in your brain. And when your thoughts are familiar to yourself, it travels at about 402 kilometers per hour. So it's so quickly when that thought pops in your mind, it's almost like you can't control that, right? But there is a way to rewire our brains. I want you to think of a field, an open field. And that is exactly how our brains are, right? It's an open field. And the neural pathways in our brain, those are the pathways in which the information travels. Those pathways are almost like footpaths in the field. So what happens if you use a footpath constantly? It gets more entrenched. It gets to a point where there's only dust and you can clearly see that footpath, all right? Some of our familiar thoughts are like those footpaths. So how to drive, for example, how to talk, how to speak, how to read, how to make food, for example. Those are some of the more entrenched neural pathways that has been established in our brains, okay? Our thoughts also travels via those pathways. So the way we think travels in those pathways. So what are the thoughts that you've had since you were little, growing up? Are you maybe faced with thoughts of, I can't do this, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I am not a good communicator, I am not good with maths? Because the more we use those thoughts, the more entrenched those footpaths become. Rewiring our brains takes us to a different method. It says, leave that footpath, go for the bundu bashing option and use a different path. In the beginning, it will be difficult because there will be thorns in the way and there might be branches and weeds, and it will be very difficult to cut through those unwalked on paths, right? Those areas in the field where there's no path at all. Those of you who like hiking in the mountains, you look for the footpath that is entrenched. The one that has lots of weeds growing over, you don't go there because nobody is using that. When we rewire our brains, we say, choose those paths. Think differently about who you are, what you are capable of, what you can do in this time. So when you, for example, let's say, personally, I'm not very good at numbers, okay? I've got lots of other talents and gifts, but numbers is not one of them, and that's fine. But every time I am faced with a spreadsheet or something around costing or an invoice, that thought travels at, in my case, probably 700 kilometers per hour, and it tells me immediately, I can't do this. I'm not good with numbers. If I want to rewire my brain, I will have to say, well, you know what? I might not be good at it, but I am worth trying. I will not get it right, but today I will try. And that takes practice. That takes a lot of effort. But the more we use that new footpath that we are creating, the more the old one will grow over. The more the old one will be, an old path. So we just have to force ourselves, engage in our logical brain, train our thoughts to be a little bit different. I am worthy. I am enough. I can do it. I can definitely do this, or I will try to do it at least. Does that make sense? Is everyone fine? Will you stop me if I'm talking rubbish? Cool. Haven't had any comments yet, so I guess I'm okay. So rewiring our brains in this time is quite important, and it's not about, overcoming the situation. It's not about thriving in the situation, but it's about identifying those key areas where you are struggling and just tweak your thinking. It will be difficult at first, but the more you start to use that different footpath, the more entrenched it will become. And the information will then automatically start going that route when you are faced with those situations. All right. Guys, I've got 15 minutes left. I quickly want to take you through the last page. And if you research wellness tactics and how to, be kind to your mind and how to improve your mind during this time, there are many, many, many things coming up. And you get different viewpoints, and you get your Tony Robbins who said your power of positive thinking, and you get your guys who say, no, you need to meditate for 5 hours and go up to the mountains. You get your guys saying that you just need to force yourself to feel better. The tips that I have on here were the ones that resonated with me the most. And it is, for me, a very practical way of dealing with the things that are going on at this stage. The first thing there is the soft belly breathing, right? We can still take, if we say we need to take breathing exercises, we can still breathe, but be tensed in our tummies. The soft belly breathing forces us to relax. It forces your tummy to relax, and then air is much more likely to come into your lungs and then to your brain. Remember, our brains need the oxygen. It needs oxygen to function. It needs it to think. And by breathing, you really force your amygdala to give the control over to your frontal lobes. All right. But not only hypertensive breathing, it is soft belly breathing, deep breaths in and out. And this works amazing with kids as well. When they are feeling anxious, when they are feeling stressed, breathing exercises are the best way to overcome that, especially in the moment. If you feel tensed, driving to the shop, try to regulate your breathing. It really, really helps. This next thing there is be mindful. Now, there's a picture of a yoga person doing yoga. I'm not saying go into the mountains and meditate for 5 hours, okay? Mindfulness is literally about 3 things. It's about being conscious, it's about being comfortable, and it's about being aware, all right? You can be mindful any place. You can be mindful while you are cooking, trying to smell the senses or smell the food that you are cooking, seeing what is going on around you. It's literally taking yourself out of your situation for a moment, being aware of what's going on and becoming comfortable in that. All right. That is being mindful. That helps us to think through things. It helps us to regulate our breathing. It helps us to function better. All right. So the mindfulness really helps. It's not about sitting in a pose and, focusing on nothing for 20 hours. It's not about that. It's about being conscious of your environment, hearing the cars going by, smelling the fumes from outside, seeing the dogs play outside. There's really a lot of power in that. Manage your ego. Managing your ego is about identifying that inner critic in yourself. We can be very tough on ourselves, and we are actually our own worst enemies sometimes. Identify those negative thoughts that travels against 700 kilometers per hour, and try to rewire your brain to think differently about who you are and what you are capable of in this time. Take away the stress, take away the expectations, take away the whole thing of the pressure about being everything, being a mom, being the cook, being the homeschool teacher. There's so much pressure on us today, with everything we have to do, and the dads as well. I'm just making use of a mom as an example, but there's lots and lots of pressure on us, and for us to identify those areas where we are very critical on ourselves, it's very important, so that we can just take off the pressure, realize that we are in a difficult situation, and be compassionate towards ourselves. And this takes me to the next point, being vulnerable and cultivate compassion. For me, this is probably the most important part. We cannot be compassionate towards ourselves or to others if we are not vulnerable to ourselves or to others. It is so important for us to be realistic, to be honest. Nobody has it together all of the time. We have good days and we've got bad days, but nobody is in a person or a person that can have everything together throughout. Try to stay clear from Pinterest and all the activities that kids are doing, and how people's businesses are thriving in this stage, and how other people are just reaching out and doing amazing stuff. That is great for them, but be vulnerable about who you are, especially towards those around you in your community as well. Explore your calling. I deliberately did not say find your calling, but explore it. Give yourself some room to play. Do stuff that you enjoy, whether it's gardening, whether it's cooking, whether it's playing with your kids or the dogs or whoever. Explore what you are meant to do in life. Paint, drive, or paint and write, or draw, whatever you want to do. Just give yourself some room to be creative. Love thyself. As I've said, we are sometimes our own worst critic. It's difficult for us to be kind towards ourselves, but to love ourselves in this time is extremely important for our own sanity and well-being. Food for thought, right? It's not about changing your diet completely. Just know that your brain is using 20% of the nutrients that you put into your mouth. All right. So whatever that is, 20% of that goes to your brain. So the more healthy we eat, the more we are enabling our brains to function better. One specific vitamin that is quite important for our brain is omega-3. It's unfortunately fish oil. I don't eat fish. So try to find maybe a tablet or something that does not smell like fish if you are like me. But the omega-3 is quite important for our brain's functioning. Sleep is very important. All right. While we are sleeping, our brain processes. It's almost like there's an admin assistant in our brain, and she or he waits until we are asleep to sort out the filing. All right. Allow yourself some sleep. I'm very bad at that because at night is sometimes the only time that I can focus. But it is very important for us to at least get enough sleep over a weekend then if the week is too hectic. All right. Seek the sun. Don't sit in the sun and get sunburnt. That's not the point here. 20 minutes of sunlight. When my youngest daughter was born, she had jaundice, and the doctor told me that I need to sit in the sun for 20 minutes a day. I didn't really enjoy that all the time because I am as pale as a leaf, and when I sit in the sun, I get burnt. But the 20 minutes of sunlight really, really helped actually. And it's something that to this day she really enjoys if I go outside and I sit in the sun with them. Shake the body and laugh, all right? Even if it's not, running a marathon. I strongly believe that running spreads panic, but some other people enjoy running. I like to go for a walk or just to, play around at the house. We sometimes put music on in the house and then everyone dances here. So whatever you want to do, just to get that blood circulation going, right? Laughter is very good for many, many reasons. But from a physical perspective, it also helps you to get some oxygen into your mind and to take off the edge. Striking a pose, right? There was, I think in 2011, there was a study conducted, or some researchers said that if you strike a pose like a superhero before important events, it is likely that you will be more confident during the event, right? Everyone got on the bandwagon. Everyone was standing outside meeting rooms like Superman or Batman or whoever they wanted to be. After a while, some real scientists did studies. They said that no, there is definitely not an effect on. Sorry, I think my mic is perhaps muted. Brendan, can you guys hear me?
Good.
Good.
You're good. You
cool.
Carry on.
So everyone was striking a pose. Real scientists came in. And they said, no, it's not a true story, but there is some value in in your posture and looking after your posture. So when you sit in front of your computer, try not to slouch, because that restricts our airways. It has an effect on our gut and our enteric nervous system. It has an effect on our heart rate. Try to sit up straight. Try to walk up straight. It just puts your mind in a bit of a different space. All right. And then the daydreaming is quite interesting. There's this thing called positive constructive daydreaming. Okay. And they say that if you stare out of a window or do any activity that almost has a low impact or a mild impact, like knitting or crocheting or staring out of a window, that actually helps your mind to go into a meditative state. It helps you to solve problems. It helps you to think, and it helps you to process what is going on. All right. So don't underestimate the value of just sitting and staring. I used to take the train when I was still living in Gauteng, and that for me was so meditative, to just stare out of the window, and I found my thoughts just going and jumping, and jumping from the one topic to another. And I found at some stages that I was able to solve problems without even trying to. So try to do that meditative state. Any activity that doesn't really engage your mind too much, but that keeps you just active for that state. TV, by the way, is not a good thing, all right, because there's too many stimuli and it distracts your brain from thinking. But any other low-level activity would really, really help you. Calling up important memories, make connections between events that happened, and help you to process what's going on. Right, guys, this is a mouthful. I am done from my side. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Was it a valuable session? Usually I can sense from the energy in the room, and I can ask questions, and today was a bit different. Couldn't see your faces, so I was laughing at my own jokes. That's fine. I'm very comfortable to do that. But did you find it helpful? Did you find it useful? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Great stuff. I see that there are some chats here. Thank you. So refreshing. Thanks, Amol. I hope that was refreshing. I hope that didn't put more pressure onto you. That was definitely not the point. But yeah, it's just a gentle way of reminding, reminding us what our bodies are facing at this stage. Okay, so there's a good question here. How easily will our brains adapt to the new normal? That's a very good question. According to research, it depends on the amount of change that it requires. So if it's a simple thought that you just need to change, for example, if you are right-handed and you unfortunately break your arm for some reason, and now you need to switch over to your left hand, right? By constantly using your left hand, now writing with your left hand and doing everything else with your left hand, your brain actually will adapt quite quickly to that. So it depends on the amount of change required, and it depends on how often you use that new pathway. The more often or the more frequently you use that pathway, the sooner you'll get to that. Unfortunately, when it comes to matters of the mind, right? So it's not really physical, but it's more a way of thinking. Our thinking are deeply entrenched thoughts. Our thinking are deeply entrenched patterns that comes with us from very, very young age. And there might be a few other obstacles that you have to first overcome in changing your thoughts, right? For example, if you're working with self-worth, there might be some things that you need to change first in terms of where did you learn that you are not worthy? Where did you get that perception that you are not worthy? And that might take some time to deal with. Once that is being dealt with, and it's a continuous process, right? It's not something that changes overnight and all of a sudden we're different people and we think differently. It's a process, and it's like exercise. The more you use it, the better you become at that. I hope that answers the question. All right. Just trying to see if there's any other questions.
Other questions? Last opportunity to ask a question before we sign off.
Cool. Really helped me. That's great, guys. I'm so so glad that there were some people who felt that, you know, that the session helped them. I can't really see, I'm so scared that I missed some of the questions. Right?
No, I've
just some compliments. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. Cool. I think that's it from us. We are out of time. If there are any other questions, guys, you are more than welcome to email me. I'm going to give the presentation. I've already sent it to Brendan, so he would be able to send it to all of you. And Brendan, please include you can someone use my Gmail address.
okay.
So if you guys have any questions, please let me know via email. Would that be good?
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Great.
Over to you, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you so much for this very, very, very valuable presentation. It was so informative and very practical, I thought. It allowed us to recognize the challenges that we face within ourselves and our environment, and then give us some coping strategies that are, I just love the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing.
No, the grounding techniques. Brendan, what I will do is I'll send that specific PDF file with you, or with the presentation. Yeah. So you can
that's just an immediate response, but your last few slides were very practical, and thank you for giving up your time and your expertise. It's really appreciated. We'll see you next year within the Valcare space.
Hopefully again. Not next year. Hopefully there will be another opportunity coming up this
year. Maybe we'll see. Thank you for offering. But guys, thank you so much for participating. Next week is another session on the body. It is being run by John McGrath. For those of you who are in the Pole area would probably know John quite well. He's very active in sports psychology and motivational speaking, and he'll be giving a talk on the importance of looking after your body and how that also impacts your mind and your spirit as well. So same time next week, and we have facility to cater for more people, so please do join. Before we go, I would just like everyone to unhide their video so we can take a group photo of the session. So if you can unhide your video so we can see who you are, I'll just I'll take a screenshot. Okay, everyone smile. 1, 2, 3. Great. So many people are going to take 2. So I'm going to do another one quickly. Everyone smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope to see all of you next week again. And please know that you are all in our prayers. We have Monday morning prayer meetings. So if you would like to join that, speak to Yolanda. And we do pray for the wider network often, and know that we recognize the challenges that you all face. Hopefully this will allow you to help yourself and help others around you. So bless you all. We'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you.